In this channel we follow events and speeches mostly related to trade shows about innovations and technology. These areas, especially in the last few years, are profoundly influenced by geopolitics, and for this reason we cover relevant presentations in this field too, and we will do even more in the near future. So, as of today, in March 2026, in terms of geopolitics and technology, there is a war in Iran, and there is a leading American AI company, Anthropic, that has been labeled as a supply chain risk to national security, because it refuses to give access to all of the features of its technology. Also, as of today, the media in the United States report that they have limited access to information from the government, particularly regarding immigration or the justifications for the conflict in Iran and the conflicting reports on the status of nuclear capabilities in the region. About 6 months before these events, renowned professor Jeffrey Sachs was at a meeting in Hong Kong about trade, finance and sustainable development within the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. Back then, his insights were sharp. Today, they feel almost prophetic. Revisiting his comments now, in fact, it is clear that Sachs didn't just comment on a situation. He precisely mapped out the very challenges that some countries in the world, and in the US in particular, are currently facing. Take a listen.
The theory of democracy is based on the idea of a well-informed public that can participate responsibly in their affairs, and that what they want to do is to ensure that the leaders that are selected through elections are similarly responsible to carry out the wishes of the public. Unfortunately, in the United States, this system is not working now at several levels. The public is not informed in part because there's no interest in the government in informing the public about public policy issues. So the quality of the discussion in the public, or the quality of the deliberations, is extremely low. The manipulation factor is very high. The manipulation by the government itself, which does not want public participation, and the manipulation on behalf of the government by those groups that are really affecting the government policy. And one of those groups is Silicon Valley itself. So the level of discussion about these issues is not good. And this is a practical problem. There are two facts which have caused a deterioration of the American governance over the past 40 years. One is that the U.S. Government became increasingly secretive and focused on militaristic approaches. So it's not an open policy towards the world, but rather many wars. And the number of wars in the last 40 years in that the U.S. has engaged in has been very, very high. Wars are fought with secrecy, and they're not subject to public control. And this has made our government even more remote from the principles of democracy. Second, the government became very corrupted by money, because when you hold elections in the US system, this is paid for by campaign contributions. And those contributions increasingly come from the ultra-rich who are trying to dominate the government policy. You remember Elon Musk campaigning with President Trump, and he was giving away $1 million a day to voters in Pennsylvania to generate interest. But $1 million a day for Elon Musk is, like throwing pennies. It doesn't mean anything, but it was enough to manipulate the political system. And it was taken almost as normal in the United States because we are so used to big money determining our politics. And so a democratic system depends on certain attributes to function effectively. It's not the only form of government, of course. It's not the only form of government that can work. But for a democracy to work, you need a well-informed public, and you need the public opinion to have an influence on the government functioning, at least, of course, with a competent government as well. These attributes don't apply in the United States now, unfortunately. So it's a democracy in form, but in practice, it is a very highly centralized power. And almost everything Donald Trump does is by a decree. So our Congress, which is supposed to play a major role in our politics, plays almost no role day by day. When the tariff on China goes up, or when it goes down, or when the export ban goes up, or when the export ban goes down, this has nothing to do with the Congress or with legislation. It's all by executive decree of the President of the United States, who was put into place by the money of Silicon Valley, for example. So this is a very strange system. It is not a technocratic system as in China. There is no technocratic class of well-trained leaders. In fact, in our cabinet in the United States, 35 members of our cabinet, there isn't one single PhD of the 35. They are not well-trained. They're not technically sophisticated. They are told basically what to do by outsiders. And so this is also a very particular problem. And it is very hard to solve this effectively right now. So the crisis will continue for a while. I don't know exactly how it's going to be resolved, but we don't have effective governance right now that is logical, based on planning, based on rational assessment, based on technical considerations. It's very much driven by very particular interests and short-term judgments and orders that are not really prepared in a serious and systematic way. But I wanted to say, if I could, just also to add and ask a question on the training of the large language models. Part of the issue is the access to the data to train those models, and who will have access to the data. Of course, OpenAI to train ChatGPT simply took all the data that it could find, whether it was copyrighted, owned privately, everything, from the newspapers, the social media, and it uses data from the users itself in terms of their interests and so forth. So one question is access to the data. If data are pre-filtered, who does the filtering? Because this is a very major problem, at least in an unequal society like the United States. Then there is a second question. After the model is trained, then, and I ask the engineers, then certain conditions are put on so that it doesn't make too many mistakes or sound like a horrible person, that it's not impolite or sound like someone who wants to kill you and so forth. Some of these systems, I think Grok is one of them, has very few constraints, it seems. It's able to make very nasty answers. Others are constrained in other ways. The power to manipulate through that post-training period seems to me to be very high. If ChatGPT because of OpenAI, wants certain answers, you could get 1 billion people believing in a particular direction, because most of us now ask ChatGPT a question. And if in the end ChatGPT gives an answer, it's not necessarily on its training data, it could be on its post-training filters to come up with a particular answer. Yesterday I asked a question, I won't tell you exactly what it was, but ChatGPT answered, "That is a politically sensitive question." And then it gave me an answer that was very politically correct from a US government point of view. I happen to know it was not the right answer. I was smarter than ChatGPT. It gave me the standard propaganda answer. It did not give me the real answer. And I could see that there was a filter there that was basically saying at the beginning, I'm not going to get into that with you. I don't know how that works exactly, except the first line said that is politically sensitive. So I wonder about the capacity of manipulation being very high, not because of the biases of training, which is often identified, but the biases that are put into the post-training control of what the system reports. And we should, in the US context, these are privately owned platforms that have all the attention of the public. And they have certain desires. One is to make a lot of money. So they want to manipulate us to continue to use the platform. That we know for sure also, because when ChatGPT answers me most of the time, it says, "That is a brilliant question. That is so smart. Let me help you with that great idea." Oh, come on, please, get a grip. But it's basically trying to encourage me to use it, and it succeeds because you like to have that answer. So there's a lot of manipulation possible, and I just wonder about what we should be doing about that as well. It's not the pre-filter, it's the post-filter.
The conversation then switches to the importance of cooperation on a global scale regarding artificial intelligence. The need for cooperation emerged in many other events that we covered. Here it is viewed as being as important as the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Let's hear from Dr. Sachs.
We're going to have cooperation, and I think the governments are going to understand they're very vulnerable if we don't have this cooperation. I want to come back to the nuclear analogy. First of all, I don't quite agree with you. We're very lucky we avoided a nuclear war, and we're not done with that risk by any means. So we have to be completely attentive to it. And one of the lessons of the nuclear age was that it immediately escaped the scientists. Of course, everybody who has seen the movie Oppenheimer, if you have seen it, that's the story of scientists inventing the atomic bomb and the politicians taking over the atomic bomb immediately. And the scientists will not control this technology in the end. They will develop it, but they won't control it in the end. It will be controlled for other reasons. The reasons that we have escaped a nuclear war are not only the logic of mutual assured destruction, so-called, but also unbelievable good luck on the one hand, because we came very close to nuclear war on several occasions, and also global cooperation, which at least puts some modest level of control into this horrendously dangerous technology. And the single most important control was the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which has been in effect since the 1960s. And it at least slowed the danger to reaching complete disaster. But I want to stress we're not past that disaster by any means. So we need the global cooperation, and the United Nations remains the only place where we can truly get worldwide engagement on any issue. And so having the United Nations work effectively is extremely important. I want to give a plug because I am very much hoping that China will host a major campus of the United Nations in the future. There are several campuses of the UN. Of course, New York is the headquarters, but Vienna and Rome and Paris and Nairobi are also places where important UN functions are carried out. But in Asia, no. There are offices. There is no major UN organization here. And I believe that China would be a wonderful host of a UN organization about the future technologies and sustainable development. And this is needed, and China can offer that, and then it becomes a service for the world and a venue where the serious global discussions can take place. So this is something that I think is extremely important. It's not easy, but it's also, just like in the nuclear age, the realization by governments that this has to be controlled before it gets out of everybody's control, including the governments themselves, so that we can use this technology responsibly. After the atomic bomb was made in 1945, first it was used twice, of course, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, completely irresponsibly by the United States. It should never have been used because Japan was on the verge of surrendering, and it was probably used as a demonstration effect rather than as a real measure to defeat Japan. This is a much debated historical issue, but my view is Truman was very wrong to use this weapon, and he was probably trying to show off the power of the United States to Joseph Stalin more than to defeat Japan, which was already defeated by August 1945. But then the US thought, well, we will have 30 years of an atomic monopoly. They thought that. They were wrong by 26 years, because 4 years later, the Soviet Union had the atomic bomb. Then they said, well, we'll make a thermonuclear bomb. And they said, we'll have another long monopoly. And of course, the hydrogen bomb, the thermonuclear bomb, was developed almost the same time as in the United States and the Soviet Union. There was no monopoly. And now, of course, it has spread to 9 countries. And President Kennedy thought it would spread to 40 countries by now, had there not been the treaties that he helped to put in place, the Test Ban Treaty and the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And that's probably true, that the diplomacy didn't stop us from having this terrible risk, but it also reduced the risk. And we have to do the same thing with all powerful technologies, because the technologies that we have today are so powerful, not only AI, but the biotechnologies and the nuclear technologies and the space technologies and the cyber warfare and so forth are so powerful and so potentially destructive that they must be under control of the global responsibility. And that means treaties and negotiations. And I think we should really work on that. And I believe China can play an absolutely spectacular, positive role for the world in helping to bring that about.